Hello. So, what you're about to watch is what I recorded this morning. It is currently Wednesday. It is a story I said I wasn't going to do. I had a change of mind. Decided there was a fun way to do it, which you may or may not enjoy, and I don't really make any apologies for. I'll be back at the end to explain a few things. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy this. See you in a bit. Far out to sea, where the water is at its bluest, it's there that the sea is its very deepest. Down, 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 deeper than any ship's cable will go, deeper than many church spires would have to be placed upon one another, there down in the depths. But people of the sea live. Now, you might think that the bottom of the sea is a rather barren place, where there is only plain white sand. Nothing could be further from the truth. Strange exotic plants grow there and trees, which the fish swim through as if they were birds of the air. And it is here that the Sea King's palace can be found, magnificent building made from coral. Now, the Sea King had been a widow for many years and not remarried. And so his mother took on the affairs of the palace. She was a great and noble woman, where most people of the sea to show rank had 6 oysters upon their tail. She had 12. Now the Sea King had 6 beautiful young daughters, and they were quite happy there at the bottom of the sea. The Sea King's palace garden, each one had been given a small piece of land where they could make a garden of their own. One had fashioned hers in the shape of a whale, another in the shape of a mermaid. But the youngest daughter, who everyone decreed was the prettiest, made her garden in the shape of the sun. She only decorated it with similar colours. The only ornament in her garden was a pale marble statue of a boy which had sunk down many years ago. Now, the children of the Mer King, once they reached their 15th birthday, were finally allowed to rise from the depths of the ocean, up, up, up towards the sun, towards the moon which they saw shining down through the depths at night, past the great whales that passed over like clouds, up to where the ships of man passed over. Now, the youngest daughter was desperate for her time to come, for her 15th birthday where she may rise above the waves. She had a long time to wait. The 5 sisters must go before her. She would watch them envious as year after year they rose to the surface. She would beg them to tell her what their favourite sight was. The oldest told of how she had lain on a sandbank and watched the lights of a city glitter beneath the moon. She had seen church spires and bells ringing and wondered at the craftsmanship of man in his cities. When her time came, another told of a beautiful sunset which turned the sky red and gold. Another told of how she had bravely swam up a river and seen human children playing. And finally, the sister whose birthday came in winter rose up and saw the snow and great icebergs like crystalline church spires floating through the water. Oh, how the youngest daughter envied them all. finally, at last, her 15th birthday came. Her grandmother came to her and decorated her head with a wreath of lilies, and upon her tail placed 8 pale white clamshells. They hurt, nodded the grandmother. Rank has its inconveniences. And so it was, with great joy in her heart, finally, the little mermaid, rose from the depths, up, 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 broke the surface of the water. And there, a great ship waited at anchor. Its sails unfurled, barely a breeze. Preparations were being made for a great party. And as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, there was laughter and singing and dancing, and the sky was filled with fireworks, the likes of which the little mermaid had never seen before, and quite afraid she dived beneath the waves. But her curiosity and courage got the better of her, and she rose again to watch. What caught her eye the most was a young prince, whose birthday it must have been, for all the celebrations seemed centred around him. He couldn't have been much older than her. She couldn't look away from him. She was entranced, and even though it grew later, she did not want to return. The waves began to get a little higher. Clouds darkened the already night sky. Lightning flashed. The ship rocked upon the sea. It took in its sails. The little mermaid watched as it was cast by the forces of the waves, this way and that, trying to keep sight of it and of the mesmerising prince on board. The storm became so fierce that the ship was no match for it. Eventually the wooden hull of the ship gave way to the power of the sea. Masts snapped, and the ship began to sink beneath the waves. How wonderful, thought the little mermaid. The prince would come down and join her, but... And she remembered. Any men who made it to her father's kingdom were already drowned. She could not bear the thought of losing this prince, so she searched desperately for him. When she caught sight of him, he was floundering in the water, almost unconscious. She took hold of him and let the current take them where it may, keeping his head above the water. Finally, the storm gave way. As the sun rose, she saw land, a country of purple mountains, or a golden beach. The rocky cliffs awaited, and not far from this was some great structure, a church or a convent. She had no way of knowing, but she was sure that here the prince would be safe. She laid a kiss upon his forehead, laid him up upon the sand, hid in the shallow waters to watch. It wasn't long before a group of girls came out of the building, made their way down to the beach, the youngest of which was the first to find the prince. Afraid at first, she called her friends and they went to him. The relief of the little mermaid when he woke and looked around smiling. She returned then to the depths. Now, she had always been quiet and thoughtful, more so than any of her sisters, but after her visit to the surface, she became even more so. Now, her sisters soon became tired of their trips to the surface. They could go whenever they wanted now. They decided it was better down where it was wetter. When there was a storm, they would rise arm in arm and sing as they swam in front of beleaguered ships, sing of how the sailors had nothing to fear if they were lost to the sea. Of course, if any of them heard this, they believed it was simply the wind. But every time the little mermaid, the younger sister, went to the surface, she would return to the beach where she had rescued the prince. She never saw him there again. Eventually her distraction, her sadness, prompted her sister to ask what the matter was, and relenting, she told them, swore them to secrecy. They asked a few of their most trusted friends, till eventually another merperson said that yes, they knew the prince, they knew where his kingdom was, they knew where he lived. And so the sisters took their youngest to the surface, to where his yellow sandstone castle stood near the beach. They were scared to get too close, but the littlest mermaid swam up, looked through the great windows, till eventually her prince came out. Day after day she returned to watch him. Sometimes he would sail out to the sea. She would listen to fishermen come down and speak highly of the prince, what a good and fair man he was. How it delighted her. But she never let him see her. She knew that her fish's tail meant that she would not be accepted. Now, she would listen to stories of the surface from other mer people. And she fell in love with the world of man. She wanted to be part of their world. She wanted to climb mountains. She wanted to live in a house. Grandmother, who knew more about the surface world than any of the others, would tell her everything that she could. The little mermaid asked her why it was that men drowned. And her grandmother explained that humans have mortal souls. And like merfolk, who can live 300 years or more, when a man drowns, his soul, his life, leaves the body, goes on to eternity. Not so for merfolk. The little mermaid asked if she would ever have a soul. Grandmother frowned, shook her head. The only way for a merperson to get a soul was if they gained the love of a man. A love more than a parent and a child. A love whereby a priest would place their hands in each other, perform the ceremony of marriage. Only then would part of a man's soul enter into a mermaid. Only the love, the pure love of a man, could give a mermaid an immortal soul. But that was impossible. Man would never accept the mermaids, for they were deemed ugly with their fishes' tails. They did not have legs. This upset the little mermaid greatly. But her grandmother told her that they were better than men. They would sing and they would swim and they would dance through the years and live far longer and far happier and far better. And after all, there was a great state dinner to be held that night within the Sea King's palace. And what a magnificent affair it was. The little mermaid sang far more beautifully than anyone there. She danced more gracefully than any of her sisters or any of the other people of the sea. But she was still sad. She still wanted to be with her prince and longed for an immortal soul. She left the party and sat in her garden for a while. Perhaps the sea witch could help her She'd never visited her before, for she lived far from the palace, where the sands were grey and lifeless, past a great raging whirlpool, over a hot, bubbling bog of slime. But her desire, her want to be with her prince, her courage overcame her fear, and she swam strongly past the great whirlpool, over the foul bubbling bog, through a forest of polypi, plants that were sort of alive, that reached out to grasp for her. She pulled her hair up tight, crossed her arms across herself, and swam swiftly through this dark living forest, seeing as she did how their living branches grasped things from above, the skeletons of drowned sailors, parts of ships, rudders, wheels, and, most disturbing at all, the skeleton of a mermaid that they had ensnared. Finally she came to the sea witch's cottage, which lay in the centre of a field of grey sand. The witch sat outside, two great snakes coiled around her neck. She knew why the little mermaid had come. She knew what the princess wanted. And yes, she could help her. She could make her a draught, an elixir. The princess must swim to the surface and drink. There she would grow legs. But every step would be like a knife edge in her feet. Constant pain for her to walk. Was she prepared for this? Oh, the little mermaid was. The sea witch began to make her draft. She asked for another thing in return. The little mermaid's voice. For they must each put part of themselves within the potion for it to work. Without her voice, how would the little mermaid explain to the prince who she was, how she felt? She would be able to speak with her eyes, with her body. She would still be the most graceful creature in the sea or on the earth. So the little mermaid agreed to this. The sea witch cut herself open, and her black blood dripped through the sea into the potion. She reached forward, took the little mermaid's tongue and cut it out of her mouth, dropped it in the potion. Eventually the mixture began to, it sounded like it was crying, weeping as it boiled and bubbled away. The sea witch deemed that it was ready, poured it into a glass vial, handed it to the little mermaid princess and reminded her not to drink until she was at the surface. And as she returned back through the forest, she need only spill a drop upon the grasping branches. They would leave her alone. She needn't have even done that, for as she swam back through the living forest of polypi, the potion shone like a strange star, and the branches held back in fear. She swam to the surface, to the beach near the prince's castle. Just as the sun was rising, she uncorked the potion and drank. Now the sea witch had warned her. Were she to gain the prince's love, were she not to gain an immortal soul, if the prince was to marry another, her heart would break. She would never be able to return to her sisters. She would instead turn to sea foam. The little mermaid considered this as she drank. She had returned to the palace before she came, all darkened. She had swam to each of her sisters, kissed them lightly upon the forehead, told no one what she was doing. It was worth it. She drank the potion. A pain as if she was being cut in two racked through her body. A pain so intense she lost consciousness. She woke on the beach. There was her prince before her, demanding to know who she was. His dark eyes upon her, so intense, so wonderful, she looked away. As she looked down, she saw that she no longer had a fish's tail. Instead, there were the prettiest legs any woman had ever had. The prince helped her to her feet, and it was like the sea witch had said. Each step was like a knife edge in her feet. But she was with her prince. She motioned that she could not speak or explain, and the prince took her into his palace, and she was dressed in silks and jewels. She was made welcome. Oh, she was so happy. And she was by far the prettiest resident of the palace. The prince called her his little foundling. Day after day he became more and more fond of her, and the little mermaid grew more and more hopeful that she may gain an immortal soul. But although the prince would say that he loved her like a sister, and he would even let her sleep by the door of his room, and he would kiss her forehead and call her his little foundling. And at parties she would sit by his side and watch as the palace entertainers, as the palace slaves would sing. Oh, how she wished she could sing. She knew she could sing far better than any of them. When they danced, she proved that she was the most graceful of all, joined in the dancing. The prince became more and more fascinated with her, till the day he told her that he must travel. His parents were sending him to a neighbouring kingdom to meet a princess there. But he told her that they could not force him to marry. He would sooner marry her than anyone else. The little mermaid's heart sang at this news. And anyway, said the prince, the only one that he truly loved was a girl who had rescued him from the beach when he had been caught up in a storm. A girl who had been at a temple there, a holy temple. A girl who he had never seen again but would always hold dear in his heart. This did sadden the little mermaid, for how could she let him know that it had been her who had rescued him from the sea, not the girl from the temple? So they sailed to the neighbouring kingdom. There were many nights of celebration at the prince's arrival, but the princess was running late. She was learning virtues away at a temple. And the little mermaid was very eager to see her. She had heard many things about her when she was there with the prince. Eventually the day came when she arrived. Surely she was the prettiest human the little mermaid had ever seen. When the prince saw her, he couldn't believe it. It was her, the girl from the beach, the girl from the temple who had found him all those years ago. And he told the little mermaid he had found her, that they were to be married. And already the little mermaid could feel her heart breaking. She went down to the sea, and her sisters who had been searching for her came and pleaded with her to come back. She sadly shook her head. Her old grandmother came, The Sea King rose and begged her, but she could not return. The next day a wedding ship was prepared. A great tent was set up on deck where the prince and his new bride would spend their first night together. Oh, and the little mermaid knew. She knew that the morning after the wedding, as her heart broke, she would turn to sea foam. She still celebrated with him. She still danced more beautifully than anyone else. But her heavy heart got the better. She left the party, went to the edge of the ship and looked down into the sea. Her sisters rose from the sea, looking quite different. Their hair was gone. They themselves had gone to see the sea witch. They had found out what the little mermaid had done. They had found a way to get her back. In exchange for their hair, the sea witch had crafted a knife. All the little mermaid had to do was stab him in the heart as he slept. And as his blood dripped upon her feet, she would regain her mermaid's tail and be able to return to the sea with them. He handed her the knife. She considered it. She waited until the party was over. She crept into the prince's tent. And there he lay sleeping, his bride's head resting upon his chest. She looked down at him. She readied the knife. She couldn't do it. She still loved him. She cast the knife into the sea, and where it hit the water, it turned red, as if bloodied. As the sun rose, she felt her heart breaking. She cast herself into the sea as her body turned into sea foam. As she looked up, she could see the sun, she could see the water. She felt nothing. She could see strange, ethereal figures dancing through the air amongst the ship's sails. She rose up to meet them. To whom I carried. We are the daughters of the air. Like you, we have no immortal soul, but we seek to gain one through good deeds. A higher power has seen your suffering and your sacrifice, and deemed that you too may have the chance for an immortal soul. We travel to countries raged by fire and plague. We douse the flames. We cool people's fever. And through servitude we hope that we too may gain an immortal soul and enter heaven, though it may take 300 years. The little mermaid looked down onto the deck of the ship. The prince and his bride had awoke, and they searched for her. They looked down into the sea, not up where she floated. She drifted down, lightly kissed them on the forehead, and went with the daughters of the air, who told her that sometimes it may not take so long to gain a soul, for if they were to pass through the room of a good child that the Lord loved, and that child blessed them with a smile, a day was knocked off their sentence. But if they were to upset the child, their penance was a little longer. So it was the mermaid went with them in hope that she would one day gain her immortal soul. Okay, so that may or may not have disturbed you. Okay, first of all, let's go through why I don't exactly like The Little Mermaid as a story. I find it a little bit insulting, really, particularly the parts start, the grandmother, when she puts the clams on Ariel's not Ariel, she's never actually called Ariel, she's just the Little Mermaid, where she puts the clams on the Little Mermaid's tail and says, what was it? It was something, privilege can come with an inconvenience. Saying, yeah, right. You know, it's almost as if you have to suffer to be superior or something. Just, I don't know. I thought that was a bit of nonsense. Other problems that I have with it are, well, the main problem I have is the general preachiness of the story. I haven't really looked into Hans Christian Andersen very much. I don't know if he was a very pious or religious person, but his constant allusions to church spires, church bells, the covenant where on the beach where the prince is delivered to, the whole immortal soul concept. The mermaids can't get an immortal soul unless they gain the love of a human. The fact that this is what really gets me. The fact that after all the Little Mermaid goes through, all the sacrifice she makes, the pain that she goes through, the challenges that she overcomes, she to try and win the love of this prince, she gives up her old life. She's in constant pain. She can't talk to express herself, and none of it works. And when she's even given the opportunity to go back to her old life, when her sister's handed the knife, she doesn't kill the prince. She throws the knife away and says she knows she's going to die. Even with that, and when she does turn to sea foam, and it is such a fluffy ending. If it had just ended there, that would have been fine. Yes, she turns to sea foam. She didn't win the love of her life. Still a very sad story. But this concept that she becomes this daughter of the air, who are also trying to gain immortal souls, and maybe in 300 years they might be allowed into heaven, which is unless they manage to entertain children that the Lord smiles upon or something. I mean, the Little Mermaid would have lived for 300 years as a mermaid anyway. She is gaining so little. And I just think, maybe it would have been, or a better way to end the story would have been that, God had seen her suffering so much, seen the sacrifices that she'd given, seen how much she'd loved the prince, that, he decided to give her an immortal soul anyway. That would have been a better ending. But no, it's this horrible, fluffy, insulting ending that we get, and that is really what annoys me about the story. I'm not religious myself. I don't generally have much against religion. I think it's very much how you interpret it. Certainly monotheism is as capable as much good as it is evil. It depends how you interpret it. I would recommend an excellent podcast. I'll put the link in the notes, Dragons in Genesis, which is a wonderful study of the Bible, certainly opening my eyes to a few things that I didn't know before. I mean, if it turns out that, there is a heaven or anything like that, when I die and I get there, I'll be like, oh, I was wrong. I don't know if there'll be anything I'll be able to do about it. I'm living the best life I can, really. I'm not always perfect, but I digress. I don't want to get into that right now. What do I like about the story? As I say, it is actually a good story. If you read the story itself, because I edited it down a lot and it was still, half an hour long. Andersen has a magnificent skill with language. His descriptions are fantastic. All right, his descriptions of the palace and the gardens, really evocative. He is very skillful when it comes to language. I'm just repeating myself again. So that's wonderful. The imagery he creates is fantastic. The fact that the sea witch isn't really the enemy there. Is there an enemy? No, not really. It's just a very, very sort of sad story about loss and sacrifice, and maybe not always as much as you try, as much as you strive for something, you don't necessarily get it. Yeah, but I do think that the way that it's written is really really nice. So by all means, go and find the original story, check it out. It is very good. I'm gonna probably start repeating myself again. There may have been something else I was gonna say. I can't remember. Like I say, I miss a lot of the story out in that telling. Go read the full thing. It's really good. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope the costume wasn't too traumatic for you. But that is for something cool we've been doing called Dress Up Friday. I think I've mentioned it before, whereby instead of dressing down for Friday, as I'm working from home, we dress up for Friday. I'm not going to dress like that on Friday. It's just I've taken a picture. It will be the main picture for the link to this if you have found me via Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Yeah, no apologies. And I hope you've enjoyed it. Got an idea of what I'm going to do for next week. It's another troll story. A lot of fun. So, until then, please tell me what you think. Tell me what you think of my opinions of the story. Tell me if you are scarred for life after watching me do that. Tell me if you think one video a week is fine. Tell me if you've missed me. Tell me anything. Just comment, like, share, subscribe, the usual. I'll probably drop a short video over the weekend again, and I'll be back with another story next Thursday. Until then, please stay safe, look after each other. The world's getting even more mental than it was already. It's going a bit scary, a lot scarier than it was anyway. If we hang on, if we're, stick by our morals, our principles, I'm sure we'll get through this. And yeah, one way or another. It doesn't always seem like that, I know, and it's fine for me to sit here comfortably and say that with everything that's going on, but yeah, I hope we'll get through. I hope we're back out in the world. I hope there's a sense of justice and right and order set in place, and the people responsible for the horrors that we're seeing at the moment are removed from the positions that they have, shall we say. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, but till then, like I say, stay safe, look after each other, look after yourself, do what you got to do to be happy, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else, that's fine, and I'll be back soon. Bye for now.